May I still thy goodness prove, while the hope of
Remember how short my time is.
fills my heart with
Every time a preacher gets in the pulpit, every person in the pew wants him to remember how short his time is to deliver that lesson. Brother Sidney gives us 38 minutes, and every preacher will tell you 38 minutes isn't nearly long enough to discuss these important subjects. People in the pew will say 38 minutes is more than ample time for you to discuss these matters. But we are, again, honored to be here. We speak this from the bottom of our heart. We are very humbled by your invitation, by your rolling out the red carpet, by giving us a room, by feeding us meals. And again, we say thank you for the honor of being with you again this year. Our lesson concerns time. Remember how short my time is, and I want to begin tonight with a little trip down memory lane. If you'll bear with me as I do this to open our study this evening. I grew up in Northwest Tennessee, out in the county, out in the country. Well, how far back in the country did you live? We lived so far back in the country that television reception was at best minimum. We could get, on a good day, 3 TV stations, NBC out of Paducah, Kentucky, ABC out of Jackson, Tennessee, PBS that nobody watched out of Lexington, Tennessee. On a really, really good day, we might get CBS out of Cape Girardeau, Missouri. We didn't have any cable, no such thing as satellite back in those days, but I'll tell you, with those 4 TV stations, we had better programming back then than we do with the hundreds of channels we have on satellite today. That's a shame. That's really a shame, isn't it? Back in those days, we had to manually turn our antenna by hand. And being the boy, the only boy in the family, that was my job, to turn the antenna by hand. And I hated doing that. Always at night. It never failed. It needed turning at night. In the wintertime, you'd put your hands on that metal pole, and your hands would almost freeze to that pole. And I would go out there. Somebody would stand at the door and say, turn it this way, and they'd turn it that way. Turn it a little bit more that way, turn it back that way. And I finally put 2 and 2 together. They really weren't watching TV. They were just playing with me, right? Those were the days. You think, well, they made rotors. Had a little motor on the antenna, had a little box in the house. You just turn the dial and your antenna turned from the inside. But either Dad didn't know about those or ours was broke. I can't remember, but I was a human rotor for our family. I was also the human channel changer. We didn't have remotes back then, We had to get off the couch and go and turn the channels on the TV. And that was my job. That was my job also. And those were the days. One show that we watched every week was The Twilight Zone. Mom and Dad didn't care much for it, but we liked it and we watched it every week. And I'll tell you, some of those episodes to an 8-year-old boy were just downright frightening. The one with William Shatner, Nightmare at 30,000 feet. He's up there in the air. He just had a nervous breakdown. And of all things, he gets on a plane with his wife. Naturally, he sits next to the window. Naturally, it's nighttime when they're flying. Naturally, it's thundering and lightning outside. Naturally, he pulls back the curtain on the window. And naturally, there's a monster staring at him from the outside of that plane. I didn't sleep for a week after watching that episode, and I surely didn't go out and turn that antenna after watching that episode either. Twilight Zone, all those episodes weren't all that frightening, but they always had an ironic twist at the end, and I remember one that concerns time. It was entitled Time Enough at Last. It starred Burgess Meredith as Henry Bemis. He was a bank clerk, and he loved to read. He wore thick Coke bottle glasses, and I mean that fellow loved to read. He tried reading on the job, and boss would find him and threaten to fire him. He'd like to read at home. His wife would take the newspapers away from him, tear up his books. Got so desperate he'd read the labels on the ketchup bottle. And his wife would put those up too. He just could not find time enough to read. One day at his lunch break at the bank, he went down in the bank vault, closed the door, and he had his book with him, and he read, and he read, and he read. He was having the time of his life, and all of a sudden, there was a great explosion. The building shook, knocked him down. He opened the door. He saw that everything was destroyed. Made his way through the ruins of the bank, Walked through the town, everything was destroyed, went home. His wife, everybody was dead. He was the only one alive, and he realized it had been a nuclear holocaust, and the reason he survived, he was in the bank vault. Well, he walked through town, found enough food to last him the rest of his life, but the problem, as you can guess, was loneliness. What am I going to do with all the time I have? I can't talk to anybody. What am I going to do? And he became so despondent, he thought about just taking his life. But then he looked across the street and saw the ruins of, guess what? The public library. And he walked over there and he saw book after book, and he was like a kid in a candy store. He started piling up those books, Shakespeare and Dickens and Frost. And he said, I'll read this pile this month and this pile next month. Nobody to stop me from reading now. I have all the time in the world to read all I want to read. I have time enough at last. Well, of all things, Bemis bent over to pick up another book. He stumbled, his glasses fell off, and they broke. Fella couldn't see a lick, couldn't read a word, and the episode ended, it's just not fair. It's just not fair. I've got all the time in the world, but he didn't have it. Now that's just Hollywood and that's just fiction. But I'm afraid too many of us are like Henry Bemis. We live as if we have all the time in the world to do whatever we want to do, and we forget how brief the time is that we have. And so this lecture, remember how short my time is. Time obviously is a subject that applies to everybody. We live in it. We plan our lives around it. We measure life by time, the years, the months, the days, the weeks, the hours, the seconds, the minutes. We organize our schedules by it, so ours, no pun intended, is a timely subject. Remember how short my time is. Now, we want to do three things, or rather four things tonight in our lecture. We want to first of all talk about time in general, how we view time, what we do with time. And I say we, I'm speaking in a sort of an editorial sense, talking about mankind, how man views time. Maybe not us in particular, sometimes us, but in a general way, how we treat time. Some different perspectives on time. And then we want to take a scripture safari. We want to note some Bible characters who did remember how brief their time was. Number three, some Bible characters who did not. And number four, we'll wrap up noting some reasons why we need to remember how short our time is. Let's talk about time in general and how we view time and how we treat time and some different perspectives on time. On the one hand, far too many folks are guilty of what we call wasting time. Ever ask somebody, what are you doing? And they say, what? I'm just killing time. I'm just killing time. And that's a crime that maybe we're all guilty of on occasion. It really is a crime to kill time, right? Time is far too precious a commodity to waste or to kill. Benjamin Franklin said, do not squander time. It's the stuff that life is made of. Another said, when you kill time, remember that it has no resurrection. Time, when it's gone forever. You can't get it back. I know I'm dating myself in this lecture tonight, but some of us will remember back in the early 1970s, singer-songwriter Jim Croce wrote and sang a beautiful song titled, If I Could Put Time in a Bottle. Time in a bottle. If I could save time in a bottle, the first thing that I'd like to do is to save every day till eternity passes away, just to spend them with you. Those are the days when you could understand the words to songs, and you weren't ashamed to understand the words that they sang in those songs. A beautiful, beautiful song. It is said that Croce wrote that song after his wife told him that she was pregnant. 3 years after writing that song, Croce died in a plane crash, and that song took on a whole new meaning. If I could save time in a bottle. He couldn't do it. We can't do it. Not in a bottle, not in anywhere else. But there are folks who are guilty of wasting time and killing time, and I don't want to be among that number. But on the other hand, there are folks who want to prolong time. They would, if they could, they would try to manufacture time and prolong life in the process. You've heard of the Spanish explorer Ponce de Leon, and Some say this is really just a part of legend that got attached to his life after he died. Some say, well, it's actually happened. But in any event, the legend is at least that he tried to find a fountain of youth. Indians rather told him of an island called Bimini, and there's a fountain on that island. If you drink the water, you drink it, you'll be forever young. You'll live forever. And if that be true, he searched for 10 years, and as you know, he never found that fountain of youth. But if the legend's true, he would have liked to have prolonged life. Doctors today are doing amazing things, finding a new cure, using new medication to try and prolong life, and for that we're thankful. If you have an extra $28,000 lying around your house, you can request at your death for your body to be frozen and stored in a process called cryonics. And the idea is that, say you die of cancer, one day they're going to find a cure for cancer, given enough time. If it's 200 years down the line, they find the cure for cancer, they thaw you out, they apply the cure, and guess what? You just keep on living. You just keep on living. Well, I don't know about that. Good luck with that. I don't know about that. But the point is, on the one hand, folks waste time and kill time. On the other hand, folks want to try to manufacture time to make life as long as possible. But now, number three, think about different perspectives on time. Remember how short my time is? Well, some of that is a matter of perspective. Ask a child, for instance, about the passing of time. And a child will say, in all honesty, that the passing of time, it passes at a snail's pace, right? Because a child is impatient. He can't wait. You take a road trip. You're not a mile down the road, and the child will ask what question? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? When is it going to be Christmas? And it's the day after Christmas. When's the next Christmas coming? Kids can't wait till they don't have to go to school anymore, right? They've been to school the first day, come home and say, am I going to have to go to school the rest of my life? And you might as well say yes, because life is a learning process, right? Kids can't wait till the 16th, sweet 16. Can't wait till I drive. Can't wait till I graduate. Can't wait till I move out. To a child, time passes at a snail's pace. But like Brother Sidney said, oh, the older we get, the passing of time is often a blur, right? It was only yesterday when I was young and asking those questions, are we there yet? It was only yesterday that Tanya and I brought our children home from the hospital. They had just been born yesterday. And now what? They've grown. They've gone off to college. And it's not fair. Right about the time those kids get old enough to help out around the house, what do? They move out. They move out. Not fair. So you see, how we view time is often a matter of perspective. Time flies when you're having fun, but not when you're in a hurry and that traffic light turns red, or there's a train on the tracks, or in a checkout line at the store. How we view time and how we treat time sort of varies from situation to situation. We waste time, we kill time, we try to prolong time. We have different perspectives on the length of time, and as per this lesson, we often ignore the brevity of time. We know that people aren't going to live forever, but somehow, maybe in the back of our minds, we may be the exception. Somehow, I might just live forever. And we know that some lives are cut short in untimely deaths, but we convince ourselves that's not going to happen to me, and so we plan and we live as if time will never end for us. And so we need the somber warning of James. You know not what shall be on the morrow. What is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for what? A little time, and then it's gone. It vanishes away. We don't need any help understanding the illustration of the figure. You've ever boiled water on the stove? The vapor comes and it's gone just as quick as it comes. You go out on a cold winter morning and breathe your warm air into the cold atmosphere. You've got vapor there for a moment and it's gone just as quickly. That's what James is talking about. That's how quickly time is passing us by. Paul says we ought to make wise use of the limited time we have. He said you need to walk circumspectly, not as fools but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. Make the most of every opportunity. If you could, buy back the time, because time is limited. Our time is short. Ephesians chapter 5. It's crucial for us to remember how short our time is. But now, secondly, we want to look at some Bible characters who did know how short their time was. And they tell us of that. And we want to look beginning with Psalm 89. This is actually the suggested text for our lesson tonight. Psalm 89 in verse 47. And as we go to the book of Psalms, we think of Psalms, I think of David. I think of the sweet singer of Israel being David. And certainly David wrote about half of the Psalms. God authored them all, obviously, but he chose different penmen to write them down, and David about half of them. But in Psalm 89, we have a fellow by the name of Ethan. And we know that he wrote this because of the superscription or tiny print under the heading Psalm 89. This is Maskil, Hebrew word meaning instruction, of Ethan the Ezrahite. Now, I don't know a lot about this fellow by the name of Ethan. I know he was a musician in David's day. He was a wise man in Solomon's day. Some believe that he actually lived during a part of Rehoboam's reign. And if he did, he's a very old man as he writes Psalm 89. And the issue is in this text that trouble has come to the Jews for their sins. And Ethan is asking God to hurry up and intervene because our time is running out. Psalm 89:47, remember how short my time is. God, please hurry up and help us out because time is running out. Ethan knew how short his time was. The next psalm, written by Moses, Psalm 90, a prayer of Moses, the man of God. He speaks of the brevity of time or the brevity of life in verse 10. Now keep in mind, the first dispensation of time started with Adam, and during those centuries, men lived a long time. They lived well into their hundreds. And if you like a list of the top 5 people who lived the longest in the history of mankind, you know that topping the list is Methuselah, 969 years. Now the next 4 in that list, running a close second, would be Jared, 962 years. In third place, Noah, 950 years. Fourth place, Adam, 930 years. And fifth place, Seth, 912 years. That's the top 5 folks who lived the longest in the history of man. And you may observe that there was not a woman in the list. And you all know why, right? Women stop aging at age 39. So there's not a woman in that list. Just a little levity to get you ready for Tanya tomorrow, ladies. Psalm 90 and verse 10. Moses says, well, folks may have lived longer when Adam was alive, but Psalm 90:10, the days of our years now have been shortened considerably. They are 60 years and 10. A score, we don't use this type of language today. A score is 20. 3 times 20 is 60 and 10 is 70. If by reason of strength they be 80 years or 80. Lord willing, 2 weeks from today, my dad will turn 80. His 90th birthday is March the 6th. Moses lived beyond 80. He lived 60. He lived 120. But Moses is saying, at the end of the day, whether you live 969, 99, or 9, however long you live, it is soon cut off, and we fly away. When it's all said and done, Moses says, how short our time is. We have Ethan. We have Moses. We have Job. Job, dubbed by some as the magnificent man of misery, spoke a lot about the brevity of time. We are studying Job on Sunday nights at Verona. Had great visions years ago of doing a series on Job and never really managed to get that off the ground until back in May of last year. And I wanted to sort of run that by the congregation, see what they thought about it. And in studying the book of Job, I said, we don't want to go hit and miss. Cover a chapter here, then a chapter later, and a topic here and a chapter later. When I talk about studying Job, we're going to start in Job 1:1, and we will not finish until Job 42:17. We are going to cover every verse, every chapter in these series of studies. Now, I'll limit myself to 1 chapter per Sunday night. They said, okay. And so we've been studying Job now since May 31st. If I were at Verona tonight, we would be in Job 29. We'll probably finish up sometime in the month of July. And it's been a rich study, not because I'm doing it, obviously, but it's been a rich study because of what's in the book. And as we've said, Job had a lot to say about life, and he knew about life, and he knew about suffering. And there were times that he was glad that life wasn't lived very long because he didn't know how much more he could take. But Job used a number of illustrations to emphasize and illustrate again how brief life is. Look at Job 7, verse 6. Job 7 and verse 6, he says, "My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle." Now, that doesn't mean a whole lot to me. I don't know a lot about weavers and shuttles and things of that nature. This would have been, I guess, the ancient sewer of the day, the weaver on the loom moving back and forth very rapidly. I do know a bit about sewing machines. My mom worked in a pajama factory when I was growing up, and she did a lot of public sewing for the public at home, and she wore out sewing machines. On occasion, I'd watch her sewing and watch the needle, and I mean the needle goes up and down so fast. You can't keep up with it. That's sort of what Job is saying here. Life is going by so fast, I can't keep up with it. It's just flying by. Look at Job 14, verse 2. Job 14 and verse 2, Job uses the figure of a shadow. He says, "Man flees also as a shadow and continues not." We know that a shadow is here, it's gone. It's a fleeting thing. All it takes for a shadow to disappear is for the sun to set. That takes just a few hours. Or a cloud to move over the face of the sun. That takes just a few seconds. Time is passing like a shadow. It's here, and then we're gone. Notice Job 9:25. Job 9:25. Job says, "Now my days are swifter than a post." When I was a young person, we raised cows. You think, oh, Wayne had an active lifestyle as a child, didn't he? Changed channels, changed the antenna, and raised cows. That was a life. When you raise cows, you have to put up fences. We used barbed wire fences and electric fences also. And it was a job, I'll tell you, it was a job setting those fence posts. And in all the fence posts we set, I never met a swift post. I never met a slow post, in fact. You put the post on the ground, the post is there, right? But Job is saying, again, Job 9:25, "My days are swifter than a post." Well, to help me understand that, I understand the post here, it refers to a runner, a swift runner. Kings would often send out royal edicts from town to town, and the Pony Express of the day were runners, swift runners, chosen for their speed, and they were fast. One commentator says, how fast were they? One commentator says, and how he knows this is beyond me, one commentator says a post could cover 150 miles in less than 24 hours. Now, you do the math on that. To cover 150 miles in less than 24 hours, you would have to average 6.25 miles an hour. If you've ever done any running on a treadmill, 6.25 miles an hour is not just a brief gait. You're going at a pretty good clip. I can't fathom somebody averaging 6.25 miles an hour for 24 hours to make 150 miles. Maybe they did. If they did, they were fast. But Job's point is, regardless of how fast they went, my life is passing away just like that courier going from town to town. How quickly he's here and gone, and my life is a lot like that. Job 9:26, Job says, "My days are passed away as the swift ships." This afternoon, Tanny and I went to Pensacola Beach, or whatever that is out there in the Gulf. Went last year and had a little snafu. Some of you will remember, and we made it back. But this year, no complications, but we saw some boats out there. And I mean, those boats they were fast. There were some speed boats in Job's day. Didn't have motors, but they had sails. And they built some of those boats out of lightweight papyrus. You put a sail on a lightweight papyrus boat, and that boat would go across the water. Job says, my life is just like those swift ships out there on the water. That's how quickly my life is going away. Verse 26 also, Job says, my life It's the swift in passing. It's like the eagle that hasteth to the prey or swoops to the prey. Do you know how quickly an eagle can swoop to the prey? A bald eagle about 100 miles an hour. A golden eagle about 150 miles an hour. The prey doesn't have much of a chance in getting away from the eagle. Job's point is, though, my life is passing by that quickly, just like the eagle chasing the prey. Ethan knew how short his time was. Moses did, and Job did, and certainly the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Jesus Christ, knew his time was short. Now, obviously, Jesus, eternal is God, but he knew in the flesh he had a narrow window of time to accomplish his Father's will. John 9:4, I must work the works of him that sent me while it's day. The night cometh when no man can work. His earthly work limited about 3 years. As of John 9:4, he's got about 6 months left before the cross. How short my time is. Let's look in the third place at some Bible characters who ignored the brevity of time. I want to begin with a fellow with whom you're familiar. His name is Felix. First introduced to Felix in Acts 23. Our text will be Acts 24 actually, but you think about Felix, his was a rags to riches story. A fellow who grew up as a slave, but rose to power in the Roman government. In fact, the only slave to hold, or the first slave rather, to hold the position as a Roman procurator or governor over or in the Roman province. He was married to Drusilla. He persuaded Drusilla to divorce her husband and marry him, and they did. And he was, as you know, a wicked man, cruel, ruthless, conniving, murderous. And now Paul stands before him. Felix is, you might say, Paul's judge. Paul, as you know, would take the opportunity to teach somebody the truth, and he does that with Felix and Drusilla. Verse 25 says that Paul reasoned with them, using the gospel, using the message of truth. He reasons with Felix of righteousness because Felix was not a righteous man. He reasons with Felix of temperance or self-control because Felix was lacking in that department too, as you know. And Paul reasoned with Felix of the judgment to come. Felix, if you don't straighten up your life, if you don't obey the truth, one day you're going to face a God who hates sin and you'll give account to Him. And so Paul does this preaching and this reasoning. He knows he's speaking to two wicked individuals in Felix and Drusilla, but he also knows the blood of the Lamb of God has the power to wash away their sins if they just accept it and obey the truth. Now, obviously, they'd have some major changing to do. They'd have to say not just we're sorry, but start with, I guess, by getting out of that adulterous marriage. You can't stay in a marriage like that and be right on the side of God. That's another lesson. But again, Paul is doing this reasoning before these people, and he drives his point home by saying, you're going to be judged for this. And the response of Felix is, verse 25, he trembled. Literally, he was terrified. I'm told that Roman rulers prided themselves on being able to control their emotions. You did not cry before people. You did not show fear before people. You were a mighty Roman ruler of the Roman Empire. But Felix could not control this emotion. And he visibly trembled. He was shaken. But it didn't last long, did it? Because the text says he answered, "Go thy way, Paul, for this time. These may be matters that I need to deal with, but I've got a plate full right now, Paul. And I'll tell you what, Paul, when I have a convenient season, when I find the time, I'll give you a call. We'll talk some more." The Bible is silent on what happened to Felix. History is not. History tells us that 2 years after this text, Felix was called to Rome to answer before Nero for Felix's own cruelty and barbaric nature. And for Nero to have to deal with somebody accused of being barbarous and cruel when he himself was such, he must have been a bad man. And so Felix was deposed again at that being called to Rome. He was discredited and removed from power. And Drusilla, we're told, died in 79 AD when Mount Vesuvius erupted and buried the city of Pompeii. Neither realized how short their time was. Had a wonderful opportunity to be saved and obey the truth and live for God. And they squandered that time. I think about a fellow who's mentioned in Luke 12. He's unnamed. We call him the rich fool, Luke chapter 12. And he too ignored the brevity of time. Now his profession was farming. There was no sin in farming. One year he had a bumper crop, made him fabulously wealthy. There's no sin in having a bumper crop. There's no sin in being fabulously wealthy. Some of us would say it's not fair, but there's no sin in that. But the problem with this fellow was he was selfish. He was greedy. Look at the times he refers to himself. Me, my, mine. He thinks nothing of others or of his responsibility to God. He thinks within himself, verse 17, what am I going to do? My problem is a great problem. I don't have enough room to bestow all this wealth, my fruit. He said, I'll pull down my barns. I'll build greater barns. And there I'll store all my fruits and my goods. And I'll say to my soul, soul that has much good laid up for many years. I've got a lifetime ahead of me of eating and drinking and making merry. I've got all the time in the world. And God said, you fool, you're going to be dead within a matter of hours. This night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then who shall those things be which thou hast provided? He found out the hard way just how short his time was. Now, as we wrap this up tonight, we want to give just a few reasons why we should remember the brevity of time. The Bible says that our days are numbered, Job 14:5. Job says, man that is born of a woman is a few days. I don't know anyone who's not born of a woman, do you? So that includes everybody. Man that is born of a woman, that includes everybody, is a few days. The Hebrew writer says, we have an appointment coming. We have an appointment made with death. Hebrews 9:27. I need to remember how short my time is. I need to remember how short my time is because opportunities for serving God are limited, obviously. Since our time is short, we want to invest it in the eternal. I want to seek God first in my life. That takes time, but it's worth the investment. Matthew 6:33. I want to worship God. I want to assemble with the saints. And yes, that takes time, but it's worth the investment. Studying the inspired Word takes time. 1 Timothy 4:13. Seeking the lost takes time. And time is running out. I'm told on average 60 million people will die every year on this planet. About 2 people die per second. Time is running out in their lives and in our opportunities to reach people with the truth. What a wise investment of time in telling somebody about the truth. Restoring the erring takes time, as Brother Sidney mentioned this morning, Galatians 6:1-2. It's worth the investment. Bringing a lost sheep back to the fold. Edifying the saved, and lectureships like this. How we are built up and strengthened to know there are folks just like us. Yes, we're all sinners. Yes, we all struggle. But yes, we all love the Lord and we love each other. We want to go to heaven above all things. How refreshing to see people who still love the Lord. That's edification. Takes time, but well worth the investment. Strengthening our families is a wise investment of the time we have. Husbands and wives maturing in their love for each other and fulfilling their God-given roles in the home. It all takes time, but well worth the investment. Fathers and mothers rearing their children in a godly atmosphere takes time. Ephesians 6:1-2. It takes time to be a godly dad and a godly mom, but it's well worth the investment. Again, those kids grow up so quick, and they leave the home, and we're only with them for a short time. Take time, because our time is short. Remember how short my time is. Back in 1996, a lady by the name of Linda Ellis wrote a poem with which you're probably familiar. It's called The Dash. And it's based on the engraving on a tombstone. Our date of birth and our date of death are engraved on that rock. And in between the birth date and the death date is the dash. All of our life is reduced to just that dash. Here's a part of her poem. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on her tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came her date of birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For the dash represents all the time that she spent alive on earth. And now only those who loved her know what that little line is worth. It matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. All of life, all the life we have is really reduced to just that dash between the birth date and the death date. Another reminder of how short our time is. How are we spending our dash? Are we making a wise investment with the time that God has given us? Have we obeyed the gospel, placing our faith in Jesus, turning from our sins, confessing Christ, and being baptized? If having done those things, are we living faithful lives? If so, Godspeed. We hold up your hands. We thank you for example. Keep on keeping on. But sometimes we stumble and we fall and we need public prayer for public sin. Somebody would be glad to pray on your behalf if you need that prayer this evening. Life is far too short. Eternity is far too long to take what time we have for granted. Let us remember how short our time is. Let's stand. Let's sing.
Teach me ever to adore Thee. May I still Thy goodness prove, while the hope of endless glory fills my heart with joy.